This is Rose and Sword, an essay I wrote by Terry Bale. That's me. Rose and Sword, Part C. Oh, but first I want to show you. I found a quiet place. Driving, I found a quiet place in the. Uh, it's springtime, so everything is pretty much dead. Let's see. Over here, see? Pretty dead. But it looks dead. But those things will sprout leaves, and the grass is growing, so it's just starting to look better. But at least it's a quiet place and in nature, which is nice. Thank you, Lord. Okay. Rose and Sword, Part C. Humor is another thing that we found could be sorted out using the rose and sword scale of things. For some humor can be soft and warm, constructive and life supporting, while some is hard and cold and destructive and does not encourage life. But though some humor can be found to fit on the rose side and some on the sword side, yet humor as a functional mechanism seems to be one of those things that also stands somewhat outside the lists, as it gives us a feeling for the differences and the relationships between the great opposites and between other things on the two lists. These two types of humor might be shown like this. Here, maybe I turn it this way so that you can see it. Rose. On the rose side, a good hearty laugh. Tendencies lifts up, builds, deep, close, focuses on constructive things, prompts pondering. On the sword side, slapstick humor, tendencies, puts down, tears down, superficial, distant, focuses on destructive things, provokes rejection reflex. There. Actually, it was a year or two ago that I began wondering about humor. Talking with my kids about it, we noticed that there are two general kinds of humor. Even back then, without the rose and sword scale of things, we noticed that one kind of humor tends to be constructive and beneficial overall, while the other tends to focus on harmful or even foul or destructive things. Yet, in either case, we found that a compound clashing of opposite concepts will often provoke us to laughter, making it more of a spontaneous superficial reaction, much like a sneeze or a start of surprise. On the lighter side of the swords type, or slapstick humor, let me cite for an example a cartoon I once saw that showed two suits of armor facing each other with the visors open. Two suits of armor. One suit of armor on the right showed a regular guy looking kind of stunned, while the other suit of armor on the left had only a bare foot sticking straight out from under its visor, where the face should have been. Gesundheit! Exclamation point, read the one-word caption. So the guy with the foot sticking out must have sneezed and go, got you, and flipped upside down inside. I didn't write that. Must have sneezed. Oh, how it made me laugh. It just struck me funny, as they say. My mind bounced back and forth between opposite thoughts. The impossibility of it. Yet the pictures were depicted real enough. Yet it couldn't happen. Yet what if it did? The other guy's head would be down at the feet. But that's ridiculous. Yet his buddy sure looked appropriately stunned. Yet what a response. Terse and fitting. Yet impossible. You'd never say that. What an imagination. So you see, it bounces back and forth. And this example seems to stand more on the lighter side of the slapstick category, as it was a momentary diversion from serious thought, and it didn't involve any solid connection with real destruction. For though it involved cold, rigid armor, and major fiction, and a series of mental measurings of what would happen if, and that it shocked and stunned the onlooker. All these things landing it squarely on the sword side of things, yet in being temporary and one of a kind, which are rose things, and not closely connected with any real death or destruction, which again are sword things, it had an overall beneficial effect on me. Funny how you can sort out such things using rose and sword concepts till they actually make sense. Then there is the rose type, or good hearty laugh kind of humor. Like when my husband's family tells about the time, many years ago, when they saw a mouse running as fast as it could, around and around and around, up high in the dish shaped light fixture in their kitchen on the farm. The mouse was running around up there. It had fallen through a hole in the ceiling and was looking to get out. Then, when Grandpa unscrewed the nut that held the shade in place and brought it down carefully and peeked over the edge, it ran right up, looked him square in the face, and keeled over dead right then and there. Oh, how Grandpa and the aunties and uncles laugh in remembering. Not because the mouse died, that part is rather sad. Actually, both of these examples serve to show that there is often a mixture of rose and sword aspects in the humor we run across. But every time they tell it, it makes them laugh, and us too, because we all know Grandpa, and we don't think of him as scary or so very enormous. Yet the mouse must have thought so, and because we know mice, and they don't usually croak when you look at 'em. Yet this one did, inexplicably, yet kind of explicably, explainably. And all this happened on top of the mounting question of what could be done to catch the energetic creature, and what to do with it after catching it, which pressure all went poof when suddenly there was no more live mouse to deal with. Such contradictions, surprises, and pressure releases often have that sudden filling and overflowing and kersploosh effect from a kind of sudden filling of a vacuum. That is to say, questions answered, harmony and reason restored where doubt and disharmony threatened to reign. Again, more opposites, but with a positive effect overall. So then, laughter is the result of our brains kinda bing-bonging between opposite or contradictory points. There may be other reasons for laughter as well, but this is the aspect that caught our attention the most. The kid said that it's kind of like what happens when one of those big, heavy, shiny steel balls fall through a pinball machine. It goes up and it bing bong. It bings and bongs off spring-loaded pegs so very quickly, almost in a blur, like how our thoughts sometimes bing-bong between contradictory concepts in an effort to rapidly sort out ideas and events and come to a conclusion. But instead of getting to the conclusion faster, the rapid bing-bonging sets up a kind of vibration that tickles our minds, much like the effects of blowing hard through tightly shut lips will tickle our lips. And I couldn't do it there, but here I'll do it. That tickles, but it's a vibration that happens. And that's how they blow a trumpet, you know. Let's see. Tickles our lips. So then, thought vibration will tickle your mind as surely as sound vibration will tickle your lips. It adds a new dimension above the simple elements that you're dealing with, so that it kind of offers you a new perspective on those elements. Yet it needs to be a beneficial one, or you will find that you've lost time and ground instead of gaining anything worth speaking of. That's probably why a good laugh is known to be good, 'cause at the end of it, we can feel that we somehow have more than we had before, namely a deeper or more complex understanding of the opposites involved, their position and strength with respect to one another, and how they affect one another. And, more importantly, we come to understand how these opposites correspond to the subject we are considering. At any rate, to have momentarily stepped outside our usual frame of reference, just to see things from a different perspective, is somehow helpful and kind of liberating and restful too. And often it is especially filling, like nutritive. What I mean to say is that, well, you've heard of food for thought, and of course there's what we could call food for tummies, but this is a kind of food for your heart that a good hearty laugh is shared with or brought to us by friends or family or people we consider to be on our side. Someone who kind of socially dared to speak up just to give us something to think about and brighten our day. Somehow you feel fuller and closer to that person, because speaking up carries with it the risk of not saying things quite right and getting some rejection for your pains. So you know that they just put themselves out for you. They got real, or they got fancy in daring to be witty. But in any case, they got vulnerable, and that can go a long way towards strengthening a relationship. Besides that, you also get to feeling closer to the people around you, because taking any kind of journey, even that mental somersault, with other people helps you to know one another better, builds a history between you, and enables you to share on other levels. More anyway than if the somersault never happened. So the circumstances of both kinds of humor are, in some aspects, identical. And it seems that quickness of thought is essential for a thing to tickle our brains and trigger that spontaneous reaction, laughter. It usually happens too fast to be slowed down and recognized for what it is, cognitive vibration. And if the comedians can keep it up, they'll have us laughing until we're worn out and ready to get on with serious things. So we don't go back to analyze the thing and find out the trick and dethrone the trickster. So the trickster isn't a magician after all, but a kind of illusionist. He isn't tickling you with an invisible feather. He's just dropping a verbal ball through a close-set chain of opposites in your mind. If the subject of his jokes gives you something worthwhile to think about, then you may come away with some valuable truths and depth of perception and depths of perspective that really benefit your life. But if he deals in damaging stuff or sets up only superficial cognitive vibrations just to impress everybody with his verbal sleight of hand, then he isn't really adding something new and valuable to your life after all, but strumming discordant strings and making off with the lute. Come to think of it, I remember reading something about this sort of thing in a short preface Mark Twain once wrote. Wait, I'll see if I can find it. Then in brackets, some minutes later, unbrackets, I found it. Here it is in Mark Twain's Library of Humor. That's a book, an edition after 1906. He wrote this, quote, "Within the compass of these 40 years wherein I have been playing professional humorist before the public, I have had for company 78 other American humorists. Each and every one of the 78 rose in my time, became conspicuous and popular, and by vanished. Why have they perished? Because they were merely humorists. Humorists of the mere sort cannot survive. Humor is only a fragrance, a decoration. Often it is merely an odd trick of speech and of spelling. Humor must not professedly teach, and it must not professedly preach, but it must do both if it would live forever." End quote. That was what Mark Twain wrote about humor. So humor is useful for its lightness and distraction. But to be really valuable, it needs to give us some depth of thought and feeling that are beneficial and not just distracting. Maybe that's an oversimplification, but then it leaves room for thought. Then I wrote, so that basically was the end of that. Boy, this is getting to be a lot more pages than I thought it would be. And all because of that one talk we had. It happened about 5 months ago, I think, and it's been a grid for plotting considerations on ever since. Really helpful. Still, all in all, I'd better find a place to stop soon, especially because the considerations might just be never ending. But essays can't be like that or they won't ever get read. Still, there is a little farther to go, I suppose, in order to round the thing out. If you've gotten this far, hang on. It won't be long now. Kinda. It won't be long now. Here's another idea, but it's kind of dry and tangential to the subject, so I'll put it between dots too. Okay, here's how long does that one go? Oh, that one goes a whole page, a little more. Let's do it. Let's see, 16 minutes. And that was humor. Maybe we'll leave it at this. And 16:45. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.